into Warhammer for as long as I have, then you'll know that miniatures and the accumulated knowledge of 100+ thick Horus Heresy novels are not the only things that you start to collect. If you enjoy popping down to your friendly local Games Workshop, or even just engaging in some polite conversation with your fellow Warhammer fans online, then you also start to collect stories. Not stories about the lore or the miniatures, but the company itself. Rumors, conspiracy theories, and wild urban legends are a part of any, and I'd go as far as to say all fandoms, but trust me when I say Games Workshop especially just has an insane amount of them compared to any other fandom I've ever been in, which is a lot of them because I am very chronically online. So when I asked you guys to send me your favorite and most eyebrow-raising Games Workshop conspiracy theories, maybe unsurprisingly, my inbox was flooded with some of the weirdest stuff that I have ever read, and some things which may sound unbelievable, but actually might be true. So from products being made badly on purpose and copyright threats from Disney, to secret vehicles of war being hidden in plain sight, and even potentially a few corporate lies that we've been told and even sold, in this video we are gonna play Mythbusters and try and finally get to the bottom of some of Games Workshop's most prominent and popular myths, urban legends, and conspiracy theories. Whoosh, let's go. So before we get into all the weirdness and I pull out my little pinboard with a red string attached to it, I need to do a little bit of small text first and say that all of these conspiracy theories, rumors, and urban legends are all unconfirmed, and all my conclusions about whether or not they're real or they're not real are all just my own personal opinion. Mostly, some of them are 100% true. But anyway, and I'm sure that some of the conspiracy theories that I think are true are probably false and vice versa, so as you're watching this, please remember to take what I say with a generous pinch of high quality salt. And I also quickly want to thank everyone who submitted their own conspiracy theories and urban legends for me to read, because I got so many replies and they were all so funny, and it made making this video so much fun, so thank you again for that. And of course, if you have your own Games Workshop urban legend or conspiracy theory that I didn't mention in this video, or you have an opinion on one that I did mention, then please pop them in the comment section below so we can all keep on playing detective a little bit more, because I'm not gonna lie, it's really good fun. But with all that said, let's start with the most popular one that I got sent, and also the one that I think I see the most people saying online, which is Games Workshop leak their own products on purpose to create hype ahead of a release. So this is probably gonna disappoint quite a few of you Games Workshop conspiracy theorists out there, but no, I do not think that this is true at all. From my personal experience working within the marketing department itself, whenever a leak happened, it was kind of a struggle and all hands on deck for everyone to pull together to get those damage control videos and articles out as soon as possible. I remember very clearly my buddies who were photographers being taken away from their current projects and dragged in at the crack of dawn in order to do emergency 360s and photography sessions with the leaked miniatures. And trust me, when they logged into social media the same day to find people claiming the leaks must be planned, because how else would Games Workshop just happen to have all those pictures ready so quickly, they weren't very happy about that at all. And for that reason, I do feel like if the leaks were planned, then all those assets would just conveniently be ready in advance, and that would be extremely suspicious. But unless some higher up manager is doing it himself and on his own watch, which would be extremely weird, I do think that this myth is false and thoroughly busted. Marketing focuses less on smaller games because they're worried it'll outshine 40k or the main studio. So in my opinion, I think that this may be kind of true, but also maybe not true, because my answer is based purely on my own personal experience talking about this subject within a very, very specific role. Whilst I worked on Citadel Masterclass, I was specifically told that I wasn't allowed to use miniatures from any other range other than 40k or Age of Sigmar, which is why you'll notice a severe lack of Blood Bowl, Necromunda, and Horus Heresy in the videos that I did. When asked why this was the case, as will become a trend, I wasn't really given a good answer outside of, well, those are the main ranges, so that's what we're gonna try and sell the most. And I always found that odd because I love these smaller game systems and Games Workshop is one company, so in order to show some support where I could to my bros in the specialist design studio, I would occasionally sneak a head in from Necromunda into a video, and nobody seemed to notice. So remember kids, a little act of rebellion is really important for your own fulfillment in any corporate setting. But yeah, I don't know if we can call this myth busted or not, but certainly from my own experience, it seemed a little bit suspicious. The paint pots are bad on purpose to make people buy more paint, / Games Workshop won't release a wet palette, so people go through paint faster and have to buy more. So I'm gonna say that both these conspiracy theories are, I think, highly unlikely to be true, even though, like I said, the paint pot one especially was one of the more common ones that I got sent. Whilst we all know that Games Workshop paint pots maybe aren't the best design in the world, and recently I've even been getting some brand new ones where the lid has come to me open and in fact will not shut, and that is very bad, I think that it's a stretch to assume that this is on purpose and that they're doing it so that paint will dry out more and you have to buy more. I don't know, I honestly really think that they're just a little bit married to that particular pot design, but I do hope in the future, if there is an upcoming paint release where they change some stuff, they have another look at the component and make it a little bit more user-friendly so it has a slightly longer shelf life. And as for the wet palette, I don't know why they don't make one, I wish that they would, but I just think it may be because they can't work out how to manufacture it with enough of a markup that it makes selling it en masse worth it for them. And speaking of Games Workshop paint, heavy metal painters don't use Games Workshop paints, and the paint guides on the back of the boxes are a lie. Oh no. So I don't want to speak for all the heavy metal painters obviously, but I do think that this one may be true, at least for some painters and some departments, but I also think it's fine, so hear me out. The heavy metal painter's job is to make the miniatures look as cool and as clean as possible in the heavy metal style, and sometimes that may mean using a color which isn't quite in the Games Workshop paint range. However, when it comes to the paint guides on the back of the box, I actually used to make those, and trust me, I would go to the miniature painter with the miniature, sit down with them, and try to color match the colors they had used as well as I could to match the current Games Workshop paint range to make it as easy as it could be for the customer to pick up a box and paint the miniatures how they were on the box using the paint guide. So yes, I guess sometimes it is a little bit of a hobby lie, and maybe some of you guys think that Games Workshop painters should only be allowed to use Games Workshop paints, but I think everyone on the team is just trying to create as good a miniature as they can and also create a paint guide which reflects the paints as best they can as well, regardless of the situation. The old world character Malekith's name got changed to Malarian because Games Workshop didn't want to get sued by Disney. I remember this one, and I know it sounds like silly and extreme, but I actually think that this one might be true. Malekith is the name of a very powerful dark elf lord / witch king character in Warhammer Fantasy who's existed in the lore for a very long time, with his first miniature I think being released 24 years ago in 2001. However, if the name Malekith in relation to a dark elf lord is kind of ringing some bells for you, then there may be a reason for that. Because Malekith, the High King of the Dark Elves, is also a prominent character in the Marvel universe, and he became particularly prominent when he featured for the first time on the big screen in Thor: The Dark World in 2013. Whilst we all know that classic Games Workshop lore draws a lot of inspiration from a lot of places, it's speculated that when Age of Sigmar got released and some of the classic Warhammer Fantasy characters were given a bit of a refresh, this similarity maybe was deemed a little bit too close for comfort. And in order to avoid the wrath of Big Mouse, Malekith's name was changed to Malarian. Or so the theory goes, but I do think it adds up, and whilst I can't confirm that this is 100% true, I do think it is highly likely. There exists an extremely lewd range of beastmen miniatures whose horn sculpts are so graphic that they were never released to the public. This one is, unfortunately, extremely true, and I know this for a fact because I have the miniatures. So obviously I'm gonna blur the hashoot out of these guys, and if you have kids watching, just boot them out right now. But yep. These are a couple of the unreleased beastmen miniatures in question, and just like the rumor states, their horns are, well, use your imagination. Or don't. Don't is good too. Don't do it. Don't. And whilst I can probably never ever publicly paint these miniatures on any platform that I don't want to get banned instantly on, they are some of my favorite miniatures in my collection, just because of how messed up they are. Demons are gonna be removed from 40k. Quite a few people sent in this one, so it rang some alarm bells for me instantly, and I didn't know if it was just like a current rumor or what, so I decided to ask for a little bit more clarity, and apparently Games Workshop don't really like sharing one thing over multiple systems. So like there's demons in 40k, and there's the same demons in Age of Sigmar, and also there would be the same in the Old World, and also the Horus Heresy too. And allegedly, this makes it quite hard to track who is buying what for what system. Along with this and some other ominous signs like strange wording and a distinct lack of codexes, this has caused some people to theorize that Games Workshop are already soft launching a bit of a demon cull, and eventually the demon range as we know it now will be contained entirely within Age of Sigmar, and 40k will get some kind of rebrand update to give them something similar but different, in the same way to how we have the Ruin Storm in the Horus Heresy. But obviously I would be really surprised if this was the case, because I feel like the current pantheon of 4 Chaos Gods is kind of kernel to 40k, both in the lore and the way the game works. So whilst I can't say that it's not true for sure, I will say that I am very doubtful, at least in the extremity that 40k demons are going to go away forever. I sincerely hope that's not true as well, and if I'm wrong, then maybe I'll wear a silly hat in the future or something. Somebody put the bat in the warehouse on purpose. I love this one, but a lot of you probably have no idea what I'm talking about, so the TLDR is that recently Games Workshop released their big investor report. And along with reporting another year of record profits and some more leeway with the Amazon deal, Games Workshop also reported a slight slowing in their distribution due to a protected species of bat choosing to make a warehouse its new home. And it's definitely false, but just for fun, because I love it, I'm gonna say it's 100% true. Let's go Tiny Conrad Kurtz. Apparently the Rhino outside of the Warhammer World HQ is actually a fully functioning tank which can be driven around and everything. I don't know about fully functioning, but I'm really glad that this rumor has kind of like got out and that someone sent me it, because yes, it is absolutely true and I love telling people about it. Usually these kinds of real scale recreation things are just empty shells of tanks, guns and vehicles which have been gutted and then painted up to look decorative, which don't really serve a purpose, but this is not the case for the iconic Warhammer World Rhino. The Rhino was originally commissioned to promote the video game Dawn of War and is actually functional insofar as it's built around an old tank and can actually be driven around like you can see here in this video of it smushing up a car. After some time of basically being kept in storage, it was eventually taken back up to Nottingham and Warhammer HQ via the canal and was repainted in its iconic ultramarine color scheme by the talented team of Mark Bedford and Phil Stakinskas, who were both known for their Forge World weathering skills, which no doubt came in very handy on this project. Even though she's been parked up and taken selfies with uncountable times in the Warhammer World car park, she is still fully functional even after her ultramarine glow up, which I don't think a lot of people know. So next time you're visiting HQ and getting a picture with the Rhino, just remember that you could jump in there and take it for a little ride. I mean, don't, obviously do not, for the love of God, don't, but remember, you could, but don't. Do it. Games Workshop releases Overpowered Rules to sell new models. So this is another one where I can't confirm that it's not true because I don't know, but I do highly doubt it for a couple of, I think, very valid reasons. Firstly, and most simply, especially when it comes to new releases, I just don't think Games Workshop has the incredible amount of stock kicking around which warrants them having to go on a convoluted mission to get people to buy more minis due to rules buffs. They have a tendency to sell enough and even sell out of miniatures as soon as they're released, just based on how cool they look, before anyone's even had a chance to read or fully understand the rules. And secondly, recently a lot of very important new releases haven't exactly been excellent in the game. I think a good example of this is probably the Cruel Boys for 3rd edition Age of Sigmar. This was their big release, right? Like the big starter box for Age of Sigmar, which they obviously would want the most people to buy. And yeah, apparently the Cruel Boys, the poster boys for the whole release, weren't that great. So yeah, again, I can't exactly disprove this, but I do think it is somewhat of a rocky conspiracy. One of my favorite urban legends is the one about how the original Chaos Dwarfs hats are so big purely due to Malicious compliance on behalf of the Perry twins. I don't know if it's true or not, but it makes me laugh either way. This is one of my favorite stories as well, and I am pleased to tell you guys that it is 100% true. The story goes that back when the Chaos Dwarves were being sculpted by the illustrious Alan Perry, he was receiving feedback remotely via fax from Alan Merritt, which was passed down to him then from Rick Priestley. Apparently, a big point of contention was that the hats weren't big enough, and Alan was told to make the hats bigger. And Alan, being the rascally young designer he was, and probably as many creatives are when they are given feedback on things never seen by the feedbackee, decided that he would go ham, as it were, and make the hats so big that they basically became the same height as the dwarves themselves, thus ceasing any more feedback that they may potentially be too small. Well, fortunately for all of us big hat lovers, the design became popular in the studio and kinda stuck around, giving us the iconic look of the Chaos Dwarfs, which we still have hints of today even in the brand new release. And if you want to hear this story straight from the horse's mouth, then I highly recommend that you pop across to my friend Film Deg Miniatures channel, where he did a whole interview with Rick Priestley and Alan Perry himself, all about our favorite big-hatted lads. The live reveal shows aren't actually live. Again, this is another one that I can absolutely confirm is not true, or at least it wasn't true when I was working there. Whenever we did a live show or a live preview, they were all definitely live, even if that meant the presenter presenting them had to come into work at 3 o'clock in the morning in order to keep to American preview times. And when you watch the most recent reveal shows, you can always see the presenters make little hesitations and tiny mistakes, which if they were pre-recorded, I'm sure they would have definitely been edited out or even reshot fully. I'm not sure if this is true of every single reveal show that has ever been on Warhammer TV, but certainly if they say it's live, I would be inclined to believe them. Open days and conventions are great, but someone at Games Workshop just doesn't want to do it. Now, I actually think that this one may be true because I just can't work out why things are the way they currently are if it isn't, if that makes sense. When they turned around one day and they told us all that studio staff would no longer be allowed to work at open days, I was really sad, and I was the first one in the meeting rooms asking all the uncomfortable questions, because one of the big reasons I wanted to work in marketing was so that hopefully I could go to a bunch of open days and conventions, because I love them very much. And genuinely, from what I can remember, I never really got a very clear answer outside of just like, we don't want to make celebrities, and what if the staff member becomes popular and then they leave and become competition, which is a terrible answer, obviously, and we could unpick why probably for an entire video, but I don't want to do that because thinking about it makes me sad, and that's not why I'm here. So whilst there's probably other reasons, like not being able to control what staff say at these things, and maybe even that events don't make as much money as Games Workshop would hope, I do reckon in this case it's the usual 5 higher-ups in a meeting room making rash decisions which hurt not only the staff who work for them, but also the community who love going to these events and seeing the people who make the thing that they love. But these really weird decisions do tend to like swing and flip-flop over time, like with the strange only hands phase. So whilst I do think that maybe there are a few managers who just don't like open days for whatever reason, I am hopeful that in the future they will return to us with maybe staff members being present to show us their work. OG Nagash was sculpted to be ugly on purpose and then got released that way. So this is another quite similar one to the Chaos Dwarf story, and again I love it because I love all tales of staff rebellion that end in something silly, but I don't think it's as clear-cut as the other one, so I'm gonna call this myth semi-true. OG Nagash, I believe, was one of the sculptor Gary Morley's earlier miniatures and was originally sculpted to have a more human, or maybe I should say like a more vampiric looking face, which apparently Gary was quite pleased with. However, upper management disagreed and insisted that Gary change the more human looking face to one which resembled a skull, and Gary complied, perhaps unwillingly, and ended up sculpting a particularly gnarly looking skull face onto the Nagash miniature. And this is the sculpt that eventually got approved, giving us the infamous and iconic old school Nagash model, which we all either love or hate. Again, this is a fun little anecdote, and it's certainly true that Nagash was originally sculpted to have a more human face that got changed into the skull face we know now, but whether or not Gary did it bad on purpose as an act of rebellion is kind of harder to verify. And also, I really like Nagash's face. He's got a winning smile and cheeks for weeks. And with that, I think we've busted just about as many Games Workshop myths as I can deal with right now. And honestly, I'm quite surprised at how many actually ended up to be true. But yes, I just want to say, again, a huge thank you to everyone who sent me a conspiracy or an urban legend, because this video was such good fun to make. But I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being rogues. I will see you in the next one. Bye. Bye bye bye. Bye. Bye bye.